Welcome to Awake to Oneness Radio. I am Caroline Chang, your host. The mission of Awake to Oneness Radio is to inspire the world to awaken to the universal truth of oneness. Science is now teaching us that all life is interconnected and interdependent. And so what you do to another person, you're literally doing to another aspect of yourself, because we are truly all one. And spirituality and ancient wisdom has been teaching the truth of oneness for eons. So when mankind awakens to the universal truth of oneness, there will be peace on earth. Today's show topic is Wake Up Laughing and UpWising with Steve Bhaerman. This is the second time Steve has been with us on Awake to Oneness Radio. Welcome back, Steve.
Well, thank you, Caroline. It's great to be here wherever I am, and great to be there wherever you are. And
well, you're on the West Coast. You're 3 hours, even though there's only the now, you're 3 hours early. I'm on the East Coast, you're on the West Coast.
I'm simply in a later now.
Yes.
But I'm catching up. In 3 hours, I'll be where you are.
Right. You're in my past, I'm in your future.
Got it. It's too metaphysical already, but here we go.
Well, please, Steve, I know you've been a guest on my show before, but for those listeners and viewers that are not familiar, can you please give them a brief introduction to you?
Well, I'm actually wearing two hats, even though I'm wearing no hat right now. One hat has been the turban of Swami Beyondananda, Cosmic Comic. I've been performing comedy as a Swami, or as he would say, he's been channeling me for about 30 years. And the comedy is really designed to heal the heart and free the mind, bring us together through the power of laughter and joy, and then provide some insight. Wake up laughing and leave laughter in your wake. So there's an awakening in the wake of laughter. Wow. On the more serious side, about 7 or 8 years ago, I wrote a book with Bruce Lipton, the cellular biologist, called Spontaneous Evolution, Our Positive Future, and a Way to Get There from Here. And this is a book that really talks about pretty much where we are right now, where it seems like there's a lot of chaos going on, and yet there is a wisdom and intention to evolution. And we're right in the middle of this phase where the caterpillar becomes the butterfly. So there's all sorts of caterpillar debris falling around us, and things collapsing, the veils being lifted on a lot of things. And the imaginal cells, the new cells of this awakening, I'm glad your show is about awakening, this awakening new humanity or humankind, where the currency is human kindness, that is actually happening as well. And it's not being well reported on the news, because the news is mainly focused on the falling caterpillar and everything that is wrong. So spontaneous evolution is pointing us into a future where we are recognized that we're all connected, as you said. We're all part of the same super-organism called humanity. We're all cells in that organism. We come to realize that cooperation is really the wave of the future, the way for us to survive. It's not survival of the fittest, it's thrival of the fittingest. Those that fit into the ecosystem are the ones that actually survive and thrive in these times. So my newest platform is a radio show, just like you're doing radio, called Wiki Politicky. And the focus of Wiki Politicky, in a fun way, is to bring left and right, front and center, to face the music and dance together, to turn the funk into function and leave the junk at the junction.
I love it. I love it.
So that's my work and play right now.
Oh, you're so funny. I mean, even before we got started with the show, you and I were talking, it's just like, you're just so full of laughter. I mean, you turn everything I say into a joke, but I love your humor, because there's so much truth behind that. You know, there's humor and there's truth hand in hand. And so I love that. So please tell us more about your new show.
Well, I've always wanted to do radio. In fact, my slogan has been dress for radio. So even though I'm on TV now, I'm dressed for radio.
Okay.
And I love the idea of people being able to listen to intelligent conversations while they're out hiking or running or in their car or just simply sitting at home. And something that has been true about the mainstream media, which my character, the Swami, would call a brainwashing machine stuck on spin. One of the things that's been true is that there's been a lot of heat fomented without a lot of light, and that there's a lot of separation. People have been energized by, I think, distorted perspectives. Fear and misunderstanding has been cultivated. And my experience has always been that when you bring people together at the heart, their minds will follow, that most human beings are susceptible to love and respect. And when you create conversations that make people think and that focus on the essential, the truth of unity rather than the illusion of separation, then we actually have wisdom. The body politic becomes more wise, and we're better able to act in accord and in coherence. And right now we have, I hope I can use this brand new word that I coined on the radio, situation. We have a situation.
Yes, I love it.
A political situation out there.
Yes.
And a lot of people were very, very upset and disturbed at the results of the election last year. And at the same time, the face that we now have on our American government is actually the appropriate face, because for many, 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 many years, a lot of things have been happening under the surface, and we've kept ourselves from seeing that. Now the face of American politics is up in our face. So as a way of focalizing our alarm, which it's done, the next phase is, okay, and so what would we like instead?
Right.
There's a famous biblical saying, where there's no vision, the people perish. And in this past election, the Democrats' position seemed to be, vote for us, we're not as bad as the other guys.
Okay.
We have, those people, those Republicans, they sold their souls to the devil. We're different. We just rented ours. So so I think that we need to impeach the entire impeachable system, where the power of money overrules the power of the heart. And we're just becoming aware of that. And this new movement that doesn't really have a name, I call it the great UpWising, because people are waking up and wising up.
I love it. I love that.
Yeah, this UpWising is, we wake up to what has happened. We tell the truth, Swami says, and the truth shall upset you free. So we tell the truth about what, isn't that true? Because if you can't name it, if you can't face it, you can't heal it. You can only heal what you're able to acknowledge and ultimately accept and ultimately forgive.
Yes.
So in Wiki Politiki, we're bringing together the forces who are looking at creating a coherent, sane, loving narrative and a future for us to move into. So far, we've interviewed my partner in crime, Bruce Lipton, author of Biology of Belief as well.
I've had Bruce here. Bruce has been on Awake to Oneness Radio. Love him. Yes.
Yeah, and with Bruce, what you see is what you get. That's exactly how he is. That's why we love Bruce. Yes. And I've had Leonard Laskow, who wrote a book called Forgiving Love. He is his original book was called Healing with Love. He's an MD who had a great epiphany, and he's got tremendous wisdom. We've had a very interesting dialogue between alternative left journalist Mark Crispin Miller, who wrote Fooled Again, which was a book about how voting machines were hacked and the elections were stolen in 2000 and 2004. And the alternative right commentator Paul Craig Roberts, who was economic advisor to Ronald Reagan, and who has been very active in exposing some of the perpetrations of the deep state. And what was so interesting, having these I find very well-respected individuals who've had the courage to step outside the boundaries of the usual political discourse, coming from left and right, they agreed on pretty much everything. So that was a very interesting conversation. The conversation we had this past Tuesday was with Veronica Monet, who has a website called The Shame-Free Zone. She is a sexologist. She is a rape and incest survivor, and she had a lot of perspective and wisdom on the current hashtag Me Too and women's voices. Finally, women being able to say, and men who have been sexually abused, being able to tell the truth about that. And she has a tremendously wide view on this. So we're looking to bring wisdom and enlightenment. And of course, there's always humor, because that helps people integrate things.
Yes. Oh, that's so wonderful. Well, it was science that woke me up. It was I'm not sure if you're familiar with What the Bleep, the documentary.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. That was the documentary that inspired my awakening to the truth of oneness. So, and I love it. You know what? I had a comment, and I think it was a criticism, but I took it as a compliment from one of my comment on one of my YouTube videos on the show, that I laughed too much. That was the comment, you know. And I'm like, well, thank you. I take that as a compliment.
Like that old song. You laugh too much, you worry me to death, but you laugh too much. Well, that's good. Yes. You're actually sparking other people to do that, because when people see a laughing or smiling face, because of this mirror neurons that we have a tendency to have those feelings come up in ourselves as well. So a lot of times people will say to Swami, I would love to uplift humanity, but they look like this. Swami says, well, if you want to uplift humanity, begin by uplifting the corners of your mouth.
Yes.
Because people will relate to that. So
it's so true, because it's also, you working with Bruce Lipton, I know you know about energy. Everything is energy, and it's the energy you do something with. So if you take that laughter and that joy into what you're doing, it radiates. It radiates, and it touches not just the surrounding people, but it radiates into the universe, into the world, and into the universe. That laughter, that energy. You don't, like you said, you want to uplift humanity, but you don't uplift you. I'm gonna beat somebody up.
Yeah.
I'm like, you don't uplift humanity that way, you know, because that energy, that vibe, everything is energy, everything is vibration. So that energy you're bringing into what you want to quote unquote fix is the energy that is, And I love the quote, Einstein's quote, you can't fix the problem with the same attitude that created the problem. And everything you said about the media is so true, because I think I shared this with you before. I stopped, and I'm serious, this came directly from inner guidance, told me to turn off the news in 2001, September of 2001, 2 weeks after 9/11, because that's all there was on TV was news. And I had it on, and I was kind of glued to it like everybody was. But I heard it loud and clear, and I didn't understand it at the time. Spirit said, turn off that news and don't ever turn it back on. And I was like, okay. And I did. And I have not watched news ever since. Now I know what's going on. I'm on the internet. I know who won the election. It was funny. I gotta share the story. I gotta share the story with you. I voted. I wrote in Bernie. Bernie earned my vote. And I'm sorry. I wrote in Bernie. He earned my vote. I love Bernie. So I wrote in Bernie. I voted, but I don't have news. I don't watch news. So that next day, I didn't know. I mean, it was late in the day. I didn't know who had won the election. But I got the sense from what the little bit I was reading on social media. I didn't win. I didn't read who won. But from the sense of what was on social media, I got the sense who won. And inside again, from my spirit was overjoyed. And I'm like, and I didn't vote for the man, but my spirit was overjoyed because my spirit said, yeah, this is what you need to shake people up. Like you, exactly what you explained. But I teach piano lessons. So around 5 o'clock in the afternoon, I had a student, a 7-year-old, come in, and he was all sad face. I was like, what's wrong? He's like, I'm upset because Donald Trump won. And I'm like, I started laughing. I started laughing because I said, I didn't know who won until you just told me. And it's okay. It's going to be okay. 7 years old.
Yeah. Well,
So,
I think that there's an awareness, in a certain regard, there's all different faces of what we would call evil.
right.
And I think that one of the problems with the progressive approach is that they were not really willing to face the depths of evil that there was out there.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of quote unquote conspiracy theories going around and all of that. And by the way, conspiracy theory was a term invented by the CIA to keep people from looking further into the Kennedy assassination. So that's the long history of conspiracy theory.
Right.
And so when you have a system, I believe the body politic has been in post-traumatic stress since the Kennedy assassination, which is our lifetime, basically.
Right.
Our adult lifetime and our children's lifetime. And that has created such a distortion, just like if there's been a perpetration in the family, like there's been sexual abuse and everybody is covering it up to protect somebody.
Right.
When there is a lie that is being lived and perpetrated, what's happening under the surface is this dysfunction. And so if we look at how did Donald Trump get in? Donald Trump got in because of, I call it America's balloon karma payment.
Okay.
Our karma over the past 70 or 75 years, since we defeated the Nazis and then embraced their scientists and their way of being because we're the good guys and we could use that. I think that my good friend who passed this year, Jim Marrs, who wrote Crossfire, which is the book that Oliver Stone used to make his JFK movie. Jim Marrs, in talking about the elites and talking about the Illuminati, said that the characteristic that defined them was the end justifies the means. So if we have people in power who have no fundamental moral compass, but who only believe that the end justifies the means, then we will have a sociopathic system. So now we have an actual sociopath in charge of a sociopathic system. It's very congruent, and it gives.
I don't want to hold that thought. I just want to interject here because every time I hear, I call him the Donald, and every time I hear his name, I laugh, and I have to share why. Again, I don't watch news, so during the whole pre-election and all that, when I first heard he was running for office for president, I thought it was a joke when I first heard it. And when he won, to me, the joke just got bigger. And I say that because I know who I am, meaning I know that who's ever in the White House has no control over my reality. You only give away your power. We are divine aspects of God. That is who we are. And we have all of the control of what we experience. And if you want to give your control over to Donald Trump, that's up to you. But I know no matter who's in the White House, that person in the White House does not have control over me. But that's why I laugh every time I hear his name. But I just had to share that.
Well, laughter is really very interesting in that regard because it gives us genuine internal spiritual power. In his book, Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl talks about being in a Nazi death camp during World War II. he and a fellow inmate made a pact that no matter what happened, they would find something to laugh about every day, because that was their spiritual freedom. And to give you an idea of the leverage, or as the Swami would call it, the leverage that this provided. One of the jokes that actually circulated among the inmates in the camps involved these two Jewish guys who decide that they're going to assassinate Hitler. And they know Hitler's motorcade is going to pass an intersection at 11 in the morning, and they're waiting for him.
Right.
11 in the morning, he doesn't show up. 11:15, 11:30. When he's not there by 11:45, one of the assassins turns to the other and says, "Gee, I hope nothing's happened to him."
Yes.
That is the power of getting so big that you surround whatever that small, limited, this or that. It puts it in perspective. It puts the smallness of that man's heart and the smallness of his consciousness in the proper perspective. You don't need to resist it. Resisting it makes it stronger. Even though resisting Trump is irresistible, but but
you crack me up.
Well, that's important, because what happens is when we laugh, it stops the mind. It stops the dualities in the mind. It brings more oxygen to the brain, takes us out of fight or flight, gives us more creative resources. Yes,
it's so true. So laughter is the best medicine. That's why and like I said, when I sensed that he won, just within, I felt, wow, and I felt that it is actually what was needed. Even though he didn't get my vote, but like he's stirring the pot, he's stirring everything up, and he's causing people to go within to where they need to go to stir up all this stuff. It has to be stirred up. We are living in an amazing time, because all this stuff has to be stirred up so it can get released, so we can actually move on to the next age.
I think that's right. And I think what was happening, for 8 years, we had the nicey face of Barack Obama, and yet beneath it, it was the same foreign policy that George Bush had. It was more drones and so on. The Democrats, as they've been constituted, we can't count on them to stop fracking. We can't count on them to prevent the proliferation of GMOs. We can't count on them to counteract the overarching influence of money in politics and the military-industrial complex. And so a heartening statistic that I just saw, 71% of millennials don't like either political party. And they've said that Democratic Party, that's where progressive votes go to die.
Okay.
And so what's happened is that in the identity politics that has fueled the Democratic Party, in other words, finding this hyphenated person and that hyphenated person and aggregating all this is all overgeneralization, but aggregating people who have felt victimized and unfortunately perpetuating the notion of victims and villains. It has essentially created a separation in this country. And people are in their little silos, and progressive people believe this, conservative people believe this. And so it's very, very important that we come together to have a conversation and gather around the virtues and values that 80 or 90% of us have in common. Because without doing that, we will never be able to hold our government to a standard of honesty and transparency.
That's so true. And it's so true. Like you said, it's so much about unity consciousness. And like you said, if you really look at it, we really, as a humanity, have more in common and want more of the same things than we don't. Who doesn't want peace? Who doesn't want, prosperity for all? I mean, in our hearts of hearts, we all want the same thing. So why is there war? It's just, Yeah.
Well, I think that this is really, and this is part of what Bruce Lipton and I address in Spontaneous Evolution, is the evolution of ideas, the evolution of consciousness. And if we look at history as simply an opportunity to reflect and learn, evolution is another word for learning.
Yes.
So we, as a species awakening, are learning about ourselves. We're learning through our experience. We've given the Creator an opportunity to experience everything.
Yes.
And now through our awakening consciousness, we can look at history, we can look at what's happened before, and make a different choice. We can see that we've been programmed. The Swami calls it ruled by lowest common denominator. Right. For 5,000 years. We've had dominate or be dominated. And this has created what he calls a lot of residue. There's a lot of residue. Yes. And so the question is, can we undo the doo-doo that has been done, or will the done doo-doo be our undoing? And so in that particular regard, we're actually having an opportunity to reflect on human behavior and realize we have another choice, that what we've had up until now has largely been subconscious programming. Now, if we were to take, let's say, people who are leaders and who are working in the peace movement or environmental movement, and if we used the tool of kinesiology, which I'm sure you're familiar with, muscle testing, and we had many of these people, I believe we can have peace on earth, doink, the muscle would test weak. Because internally our programs are so based on dominate or be dominated. So part of what Bruce and I, we talk about a 3-step program, which mathematically has been proven to work 4 times faster than 12-step.
Okay.
So we have a 3-step program. And the 3 steps are evolutionary awareness, evolutionary intention, and evolutionary practice. So the awareness is recognizing that it's elevating ourselves beyond blame and shame. Here is what we created. Here is what we have right now. Everything we have right now has led us to the moment that we're in. That's good news, because it's all part of our learning process. The story, what would a story be like, a hero's journey, if it was, there once was a little boy and he lived happily ever after. There's no story.
Right.
There's nothing in there. There's no challenge. There's no pushing against so that we learn, so that we develop. There's no irritation, so the pearl doesn't develop. So the pearls of wisdom that we've earned have been created by the irritation of sand in our little clamshells.
That is so true. Wow. That is so true. I love how you're using the word evolve and evolution, because I am actually, the new year, 2018, I'm going to really focus on, I started my first book, but I haven't really focused on it this year, and Spirit is telling me 2018 is the year to really focus on it. And the title of it is Thankful I Am Awake, and awake stands for aware we always keep evolving. So that's
exactly how it is.
Yeah.
And the latest work that Bruce Lipton is doing is really about how evolution of consciousness took place throughout evolution as more and more and more cells aggregate their wisdom and their connection together. So we are a community of 50 trillion cells. Yes. Rather than thinking, well, I'm a Steve and you're a Caroline, we're actually a community of these cells.
Yes.
And that consciousness that we have is made possible by all of the connection of these cells into a complex enough organism so that we can do more than just eat, sleep, breathe, reproduce, and poop. Exactly. We have a certain awareness about that.
Right.
So exactly, in this awakening, there was a wonderful video that I saw, on the eve of this election that just happened in Alabama. There was a man, and he was a very simple, very conservative man, and he had a sign, and he was standing out in front of State House, and it was about his daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And his daughter was gay, and because he rejected her, nobody understood her, she committed suicide.
Oh.
And he was saying what regret that he had, and that he is aware that everybody, that God loves everybody, and that she had the right to be the way that she was. And he was voting against this Roy Moore character, and was hoping other people would too, because he wanted to promote this awareness and understanding. And I think that as people, over the past 20, 30, 40 years, we've seen this separation being broken by racial intermarriage, by ethnic intermarriage, by young people having the courage to come out to their parents about their sexuality, transgender people, and so on. And many of the older people and the people who are in traditional traditions, they feel like they're on a different planet than the one they were born in.
Yes.
Nonetheless, hearts have been opened. You cannot force people to awaken. However, certain things may happen that cause their hearts to awaken, and that is a personal choice.
Yes.
And once you awaken, you don't go backward.
Exactly. So true. So true. That's why the title came to me on Mother's Day for my book, because actually many of my listeners and even my son, who's in spirit, has said to me, "Mom, you have a book in you." And I kept saying to my listeners and to my son, who's in spirit, that when spirit tells me, like when spirit told me to shut off the news, I listened. So when spirit and it was on Mother's Day, where spirit says, "Yes, time," and here's the title, "Thankful I Am Awake." So that is so that's my really a big something I'm going to really dive into January of the new year.
And I think you'll inspire other people with that as well, because I think we all have our experience that we take for granted because it's our experience, and yet there's much that can be offered to other people through that. Yes. Because people who are in trauma, one of the most traumatic things about being in trauma is, I'm alone in this. I'm the only one going through this. There are people who end their lives because they don't have they don't recognize that the shadow is being lifted for everybody, that all of these things have to be forgiven. That's why the show that I did with Leonard Laskow on the power of forgiveness, and my other guest, Celeste Jacoboni, who perhaps you know through Humanity's Team, with Ho'oponopono, the healing mantra of forgiveness and making things right. This is what, all human beings have something to metabolize here on the planet. If you look at astrology, we all have challenges. We all have challenges, and part of bringing forth that challenge relates to our personal purpose and our gift. Something Bruce Lipton said in our interview a few weeks ago, and he said that he's been studying telomeres, and telomeres, that's the part of our DNA that allow us to age or not age, and as we age, the telomeres become shorter and shorter. When we find ways to lengthen the telomeres, it actually lengthens our lives. One of the things that lengthens our telomeres, in addition to the proper exercise and diet and peace of mind, is service to other people. So when we have a purpose that puts us in service and connection to other cells in the body politic, then it creates, it gives us that, it tells our body, this being has reason to be here. And that's what I mean by evolutionary intention, that even if we don't see the manifestations of evolution as we see it, even if we're just looking at the caterpillar falling apart, if we recognize that this is part of a long-term journey, of a journey back into the light, You know, we came from the light. We came from the light. Life began when when rays of the sun interacted with the particles on the planet and created something called photosynthesis. We had the first life. And so consciousness now is bringing us back to the light. We're bringing the light of consciousness into our world. And it may not look like that in the aggregate, but individual cells and selves are waking up, connecting with one another, and at some point, a critical mass of the heretofore uncritical masses will actually manifest that connection, and the caterpillar will all of a sudden become the butterfly.
Wow. Wow. That is, I must have Bruce back on to go more into that, because I just this past weekend on my way, I was going to New York, into Manhattan, and I wanted to buy a gift for a friend I was seeing in Manhattan, which was, I said, I think she likes wine. So I wanted to get her a bottle of wine. And for the first time in 15 years, I was seriously carded to buy a wine. Yeah, I had to show.
Get out of here. That's good.
I am not kidding. I thought she was kidding. I thought she was kidding. So I was like, I'm blowing her off. She's like, no, I'm serious. I need to see your ID. And then that was the first time in 15 years that I've been carded. So I haven't been carded since I was 40.
Oh my God. That's great. You're going in the right direction.
I am a grandmother, and I got carded, and so when you were talking about the what do you call it? I forget that Bruce was talking about. What's it called? The
telomeres.
Telomeres. I was like, okay, I need him to come and talk more about that, because I don't know. I'm hoping, because I'm of service with the show and going to be of service with the book. And you're right, that's basically what the show and the book purpose is to share our stories, to have people on here that are awake, and to share your stories, because your stories by sharing our stories, we can touch others, and they can see themselves, like you said about the alone, feeling alone. And I speak very much about on the show about me wanting to commit suicide, or actually attempted to commit suicide. When I was first told my son, doctors didn't think my son was going to live. And that was 3 years before he actually transitioned. But I experienced a miracle. And from that miracle, it gave me the courage to move on. But I was at that place where I'm like, I'm out of here. I'm, so yes, sharing our stories is very important. Yes. So people
this is really, right now, there's been many factors that's created isolation in our so-called civilization, and the suburbanization. When we left our smaller communities, I can my parents. I'm from Brooklyn, New York, and my grandparents came here 115, 120 years ago. And in those days, everybody lived, they lived in tenements in New York, and nobody locked their doors because there was nothing to take.
Okay.
Nothing to take. Babies would sleep in the hot summer. Families would sleep out on the fire escape, and so it was. It wasn't really a very prosperous life, and yet, because of the connections and the family connections that people had, nobody fell through the cracks in those days. Nobody did. And so now, because of we've moved from a front porch society to a backyard society, to where we don't really know our neighbors. It takes a disaster like the hurricanes or the fires for people to recognize how much we all have in common. And as you said earlier, it's not the identity issues, it's the identical issues. We all need to breathe clean air. We all need to drink fresh water. We all want clean soil, clean food. We all want our children to be safe. We all want our children to have the opportunity to fulfill their highest destiny.
Yes.
And so this is these common aspirations that human beings have. What's now up for examination, and with having the current Trumpty Dumpty in the White House now. In fact, I was saying, I said,
I like that Trumpty Dumpty.
I sent him my best wishes. I said, I know, Mr. President, you had a lousy summer. Well, we here are wishing you a great fall.
You're too cute. You're too cute.
Or as we call him, Emperor Copius Gropius, the groper in chief. So the point is that with having that reality check in front of us, we're all on the same page. We recognize that it's not enough just to say, well, I think good thoughts and therefore I'm a good person. That has to translate into actual actions and manifestations. And so it begins with perception, and then the structures that come, and then the actions that come from those structures need to turn around to reflect our new realizations. Again, back to spontaneous evolution, Bruce and I identify what he calls the 4 myth, M-Y-T-H, perceptions of the apocalypse, which are things that we believe are true because we imagine that science has proven them, but science has actually proven the opposite. Like, for example, survival of the fittest. Really, as I said earlier, when it's really thrival of fittingest, is that when we fit with an ecosystem, and humanity, our species is less and less and less in harmony with the web of life. We are among the most endangered species on the planet at this point.
Yes.
The other thing is that that science has taught us that's actually more of a belief than something that's been proven, is only the material world is real. And Einstein, you mentioned Einstein earlier, said that the field is the sole governing factor over the particle. So part of what it's our field of thoughts, our field of beliefs, our field of feelings, these persistent beliefs that keep manifesting themselves. And that's why it's been so difficult to create peace, because deep down we have been taught, and this is what's being actually uncovered and revealed right now, deep down we've been taught that when it comes right down to it, it's either me or you. And we're finally listening to, our at the bottom of every spiritual or ethical path is some version of the golden rule. As you said earlier, to paraphrase Jesus' words, what you do to the less of us, you're due to me. Right. To the least of us, you do to me. So this is really where we're, as the Swami would say, where the karma meets the road.
Very true. And I one of the things I always remember from a science class in grade school, and it hit me because it was such a true statement. In 7th grade, when we were studying molecules and atoms, my teacher said, nothing is truly solid. Because when you put anything under a high-powered microscope, what do you see? You see these tiny moving particles that don't even touch each other. So it's not solid. So, but when he said that something woke up inside of me. That was another, when I woke up to oneness, the truth of oneness moment for me in 7th grade. Nothing is truly solid. So what appears to be solid isn't solid. It's all energy. So I'm like, science has truly proven this metaphysical stuff. We've gotten to the point where science has proven it. And it's like, why isn't it? Why doesn't people know? Why don't people know this?
That's a very interesting and pertinent question. 100 years after Copernicus proved mathematically that the Earth revolves around the sun, Galileo was in prison for saying the same thing.
Okay.
So it's been 100 or more years. It's been 110 years since Einstein came up with his theory of relativity. And quantum physicists know that it's only energy, and that that matter is an illusion. And yet we are still living in a Newtonian political system, where it's one force versus another. Bruce had a really excellent way of explaining this. Well, if it's only energy, why can't I put when I bang on the desk, why doesn't my fist go through the desk?
Yes.
And Bruce said, well, it's for the same reason you can't drive through a tornado. That a tornado is a vortex of very, very rapidly moving energy. You can't see it. When you quote unquote see a tornado, you see the particles being swirled around. But really, it's an energy vortex. And so the atom is an energy vortex. And at the bottom of it is only energy. And so as most of what we do on this planet is moving particles around rather than looking at the field that actually moves the particles. If we go back to maybe 5th or 6th grade science, when the teacher is presenting magnetism. So he or she will spill some iron filings on a piece of paper, and they fall into some random pattern. When a magnet is put under that, well, all the particles align themselves in this pattern. Well, if you don't understand magnetism, you go, wow, these are some very, very intelligent iron particles here that have put themselves in this formation. So I would suggest that there's many, many, many other patterns in nature, in the invisible, that we don't quite understand, and yet we've all experienced. We've all experienced the premonition. We've all experienced thinking of somebody, and then a minute later they call. Everybody. Doesn't matter whether you think you're psychic or not. But because our current science has no explanation for this, they choose not to study it, and they choose to ignore what has to be perhaps the real iceberg. They're just looking at the tip of the iceberg when they're looking at manifestations in material world, when really it's the arrangements and connections, the invisible ones, that are really moving things around.
So true, so true, so true. And I didn't know about Galileo, and that it takes, it seems like, it was over 100 years ago with Einstein that by now, mankind shouldn't have gotten it. But I guess, but the wonderful thing is that it is speeding up, and so it's not going to take another 100 years for mankind to get it.
Well, we don't have another 100 years.
Yes. This is true.
Even though Abraham says you'll never get it done, and you'll never you can't get it wrong, you'll never get it done.
Right.
Thank God for reincarnation.
Yeah.
So if we don't get it this time, we'll get it next time.
You'll get it next time.
Yeah.
But I truly believe that mankind is truly waking up, and it's happening faster and faster and faster. And I believe we've already passed that critical mass point. So I think it's assured humanity's awakening. And once mankind is awakened to the simple truth of oneness, of unity consciousness, there will be peace. So it may not, I can't put a date on it. But I believe it's totally coming. It's totally coming. Now,
when you start to recognize inevitability, that makes a big difference. It really creates peace in the heart.
Yes. Now, can we invite Swami in?
We can. I don't have my turban with me, so you'll have to imagine. But I will channel him. He's been patiently channeling me this whole show. So now I will bring him in. I'll channel him. And you can ask the Swami any question. If you have an answerable question, the Swami has a questionable answer. Okay, so now. Okay. He has appeared. I am here. And you are here. And it's great to be here because we have no choice. No matter where we are, we're always here, and it's always now.
Yes.
And I predict that living in the now will be the wave of the future, and time itself will become a thing of the past.
Yes.
And I know this because I was a futurist in a past life.
Well, thank you.
So you have a question,
welcome.
I have an answer.
Well, thank you, Swami.
Thank you.
I just love having you. I really do love having you. I just share your wisdom with us, Swami.
Well, I'll tell you something. One of the great things that I have learned is the power of laughter. Because what happens is, they say that laughter is healing, right? Yes. And perhaps you know the story about Norman Cousins. He was diagnosed with a life-threatening illness. He checked into a hotel room with Marx Brothers movies and candid camera reruns, and he got well. And when he cured himself, the medical establishment decided that they are going to study the healing power of laughter, which is kind of like, well, it works in practice, but does it work in theory? And so as they looked at the physiology of laughter, we found out that when we laugh, it creates these hormones called endorphins, our body's natural painkillers. Laughter improves immune function, and laughter lowers the blood pressure because when we laugh, it causes our blood vessels to dilate, which is better than having them die early. I want mine to dilate.
Yes. Oh my God, that is so true. That is so true. And there's laughter yoga. I did go to a session of laughter yoga once. We just was a group of people. And we just were making each other laugh, and it's contagious. So once one person laughs, the other starts to laugh, and yes, I have heard of people curing themselves. I've heard of a woman, now this was in The Secret. I know many people are familiar with the film The Secret. There was a woman in The Secret who was diagnosed with cancer. She went home with the comedy. She watched comedy after night after night after night. All she watched was comedy, and she cured herself of cancer by laughing. So yes.
Well, there actually have been studies, and one study with heart disease, where heart patients all had the same protocol, but some of them were given the message that they needed to watch a half hour of comedy every day. At the end of the 6-month period, the people who watched the comedy had maybe 10% of the heart incidents that the other people had. Wow. So it really was a statistically significant thing.
Yes.
Now, of course, they dismiss people. It's hard to take laughter seriously, right?
Yes.
Well, there was another study. They took a group of college students, put them in a room with hilarious comedy videos, took another group, put them in a different room, and made those other people memorize Croatian parables and gave them an electric shock every time they made a mistake. Wow. And the results were conclusive. The ones watching comedy had more fun.
That's funny. Yes, they did.
Yeah, more fun. So there you have it, folks.
Yes. No, laughter truly is the best medicine. And like I said, when I was told that by a comment that I laughed too much, I said, oh, thank you. That was one of the greatest compliments I've ever gotten. Because, yes.
Yeah, because people that don't laugh, it's called irregular hilarity. And you need a good laxative every day. Everything's something to make you laugh. Otherwise, you end up with humoroids, which is enlargement of the onus, where you feel so much responsibility, the only thing you're ever able to pass is heavy judgment. So we don't like that.
Yes. Now, can you tell us more about UpWising? UpWising. Tell us more about UpWising.
Well, in the past, when people wanted political change, there would be a revolutionary uprising to overthrow the system. Now, because we're in this evolutionary phase, we need an evolutionary UpWising to overgrow the system, to grow beyond that in our understanding. And the UpWising, there's 4 steps to the UpWising. Wake up, wise up, grow up, show up. Okay? Wake up to the fact that we are all one with the same one, the universal oneness. The universe has us surrounded, might as well surrender. Wise up to the power of love. If love is good enough for Jesus, Buddha, and the Beatles, it's good enough for me. Love is the glue that holds everything together.
Yes.
Grow up from children of God to adults of good. And now we're in this awkward transition phase called addled essence. Our essence has been addled by misperceptions and toxic beliefs. So as we grow up, we recognize that learning and evolution is our natural path. Jesus believed in evolution. Otherwise, he would have said, now don't do a thing till I get back. But he didn't do that. So Jesus, and finally, show up for the greatest show on earth. You know, somebody asked me recently, Swami, what is reality? I said, reality is reality TV without the TV.
Yes.
So we have a great, we have a wonderful, an amazing show that is going on, and every one of us is in the hero's throne.
Yes.
Our entire species is waking up on this journey, and each of us has been given a gift to give.
Exactly.
Each one of us is totally unique, just like everybody else. So it's important that we recognize what are our gifts to give and what are our intentions, both personal and for the planet. You know, I like when people have a bucket list, you know? You know what a bucket list is? A list of all the undertaking you wish to undertake before being overtaken by the undertaker. That is a bucket list.
Yes, yes.
And so that is how the upwising takes place. And so part of how it happens is that we, like you, have decided to not watch the news. I say we need to make news. If we don't like the old news, we need to make new news. And the way we make new news is by gathering together in sacred circle. We have a deeply divided body politic. Half the people believe our elections are broken. The other half believe that they're fixed. We've been divided into red tribe Republicans, blue tribe Democrats, who spend all of their energy arguing about whether it is worse to kill the born or the unborn, when meanwhile, the Commonwealth has been stolen by a very, very, very small percentage of the uncommonly wealthy, and the bill has been sent to the not yet born. So we need to bring left and right, red tribe and blue tribe together in sacred circle to talk until they're purple in the face. Because only as one purple people will the peeps outnumber the perps.
So true. And so true what you said about we all have unique gifts to bring to the collective, to bring to humanity. That's why we came here. We're here to share our unique gifts with humanity. That is so true. So true. So true. Wow.
Oh, that's good. We have each been given a special gift just for entering. So you're already a winner. And this is called an enterprise. So whatever your enterprise is, that is the prize you have been given that you're here to manifest and give. We are not here to earn God's love. We're here to spend it.
Yes. Spend it and share it. Share it
Spend
freely.
it and share it. Exactly.
Share it freely. Can you please, Swami, please tell all of our listeners how they can get in contact with you or Steve?
Well, very good. I'll be back at my Steve persona for this. My website is called wakeuplaughing.com, wakeuplaughing.com. My radio show platform is called Wiki, W-I-K-I, Politiki, P-O-L-I-T-I-K-I. And you can find it on Om Times Radio, or you can go onto iTunes and listen to the podcast. So go to iTunes, Wiki Politiki, and you'll be able to listen to all of our archived shows. I think we have 5 or 6 shows up there so far.
And when does it air? When do you air?
We air every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, 2 p.m. Pacific Coast Time. And because it's an international network, there are several other times that they have to air in different continents, so that everybody gets to hear Wiki Politiki at a godly hour.
Okay. Well, that's one thing I love. Honestly, when I started this show, Awake to Oneness Radio, I had no idea what a podcast was. I had never heard of a podcast, but I found out, Blog Talk Radio is a podcast, and I get to share this show on Blog Talk Radio and YouTube. So, and it's there whenever, whatever godly hour you want to listen to it, you can listen to it. So I love.
Oh yes, well you're in the now. You're in the now wherever you are. And It could be a later now or an earlier now. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. This has been
well. Thank you for doing what you're doing.
Oh, yeah. And thank you so much for doing what you're doing. And you must let me know, when will you be in New York so I can maybe try to get to New York? Do you know?
It's going to be probably in the fall. Next fall.
Next fall.
We do. We're based on the West Coast. We have a little West Coast tour in April. Then we're going to the Midwest in May and June, and September, October, and the early part of November we'll be on the East Coast from New York and New England down to Florida.
Okay, awesome. Very, very good. And people can find your itinerary of events on your website, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Wake Up Laughing, and they could be part of our newsletter, get Beyond the News and Notes from the Trail.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Steve. This has been and thank you, Swami. Thank you both. This has been amazing, and I love sharing with you anytime, always. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. As a Swami would say, namaste and namasko.
Yes. Namaste. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Caroline.
Thank you.